If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to episode 18. In this episode, we will be interviewing our friend, co-host, and writer, Cat Rambo, with guest interviewer, podcaster, narrator, writer, and all-around innovator, Dave Robison. So, Cat, how are things going?
Things are going reasonably well. I am starting to go out into the world. I have had 3 meals in restaurants now. They were all delicious. And of course, food you don't cook yourself is extra delicious. And I had an adventure. I took the water taxi over to Seattle and then 2 buses over to a friend's house way up north. And it's been nice getting a chance to see people. And I now go for coffee every morning in order to chat with the barista. It's pretty
Yeah, you know, we're coming out of a pandemic when public transportation is like the apex. It's like, oh my God, I got on a bus today. Wow.
Well, I've always loved the bus. And Octavia Butler, who was one of my teachers at Clarion West, she used to take the bus when she got stuck. And she would go on writing, and she would go sit on the bus and think about what she was writing. And I always think of Octavia when I'm on the bus. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I used to get a lot of reading done on the bus on the way to and from the office.
There you go.
But, I'm like one of those people. I don't like to be around a ton of people all the time. I have a limited
threshold
ability to do that, So I can focus it at times, but when I'm done, I'm drained. And like adding the bus on with a bunch of strangers to the going to the office all day with a bunch of people that, I don't have a lot in common with necessarily, then back onto the bus and then home. By the end of the day, I was just like fried.
I could totally see that.
I can totally see Cat riding public transportations going, you're going in a book. You're going in a book. You are getting a special short story just for you, you son of a bitch. Yeah.
So I've had some pretty interesting experiences on the bus. The one time, I never forget this. I'm going downtown, and our bus is like filled with professional people. It goes downtown, it drops you off at the big corporate headquarters, and then it goes back to the same stop and picks up more people, right? And this lady, I've got like my tie and whatever on I wear to the office. And the lady next to me is just like, oh no, opens up her purse and just like pukes in her purse.
Geez.
And I'm like,
Oh my God.
I was just like, I don't know what to say or do right now. I am so socially awkward and I don't know how to handle this.
Crisis management, not your strong suit. Got it.
Not at all. After like a weird amount of time, I'm like, are you okay? But it was like
too late.
It was like 5 minutes later, so it was like weirder.
It's like it's safe now. I can engage without having to deal with any crisis management issues here. But I can articulate my compassion for you without risking anything.
Yeah.
I feel you. Well, and I just moved to Chicago, so I've got the L.
Yeah.
And it has been it's been so wild to move around this city in the L on the, I do the divvy bikes where you can like rent a bike and go drop it from one to another. And it's just moving around in an iconic place like this city with so many visuals that you've seen so many times in film or in pictures or whatever. Every time I get on the L, I feel like I'm a character in a movie or something, It's amazing. And that hasn't worn off. I didn't do a lot of it during the pandemic, but more and more I'm doing it. And it's like, God, I hope this never goes away. I want to always have that feeling.
Yeah. It reminds me of when I was in San Francisco.
Right.
Because I tried to live in San Francisco for a while, and you would get on the bus, and man, there was just so many characters on the bus.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
All right, well, let's get this interview started. So, as you all have already heard, we have a guest interviewer on here today. His name is Dave Robison. Dave is a storyteller who has been captivated by tales and legends his entire life, even writing Curious George and Paddington Bear fan fiction as a child.
Yeah, baby.
Dave secured degrees in theater and graphic design in college, and in the years that followed, worked at dinner theaters, design studios, and even ran a used bookstore. When he was hired to teach computer classes at New Horizons Computer Learning Center, it began a decade-long exploration of instructional design, presentation, and media production for numerous educational software companies, which is more or less what I do.
Yep.
In 2012, Dave launched the Roundtable podcast with a friend and colleague, Brian Humphrey. The podcast gave writers the opportunity to brainstorm their story ideas with established authors and editors like Lou Anders, Cat Rambo, Karen Hurley, and Hugh Howey. Never one to pass up a chance to tell a story, Dave dove in with his customary abandon, narrating stories for dozens of audio fiction podcasts, as well as designing a board game, which you need to tell us about because I have not heard about that yet. Coming soon to Tabletopia.
Yes.
He also created an online story development and presentation application, and most recently launched a zombie-themed coffee and tea franchise featuring a weekly webcomic.
Yes, baby. Woo!
That's so awesome.
And finally, just like last week, you joined Escape Artists podcast team as their production concierge.
Yes. Yes, indeed. That came out of the blue.
What is a production concierge?
We got to name our positions. Me and Wilson Foley were both brought in for this need. Escape Artists has basically grown so much, and they're literally on the precipice of a whole new level of media and storytelling capabilities. And they became aware that they need somebody between Al and Marguerite at the executive level and all of the production gurus and wizards for each of the podcast streams. So they brought Wilson and I on to serve as sort of a middle layer to facilitate that process, getting narrators, making sure their narrators are quality and are fulfilling the need of the story they're reading for. Wilson's got a lot more of the better crunchy. We're the peanut butter brothers is what we call ourselves. He's crunchy. I'm smooth. so he's doing a lot of the more technical things as far as data management and structuring. And I'm doing a lot of the narrator stuff and facilitating communication. So that's what a production concierge does. Okay. And then,
that's so cool.
Yes, indeed. And hopefully there will be more to come on that point as I learn the ropes, and so many ropes to be learned. Oh my God. But I'm enjoying every minute of it. And then there's Corpse Coffee, the zombie themed Corpse Coffee thing. Do I have time? Can I tell the story of Corpse Coffee just real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I was on Twitter chatting with Paul Cooley, who is a very skilled and devilish horror author. And I was mocking Paul's age and decrepitude as he's lumbering through his morning, and came up with some suitably eloquent description of his status. And he writes back to me in the tweet, and this was on January 24th, 2021. He writes, "You have such a lovely way with words. We really need to make and market Corpse Coffee." And something about those words just exploded in my brain. I'm going, that's brilliant, Corpse Coffee. So I go to GoDaddy.com and say, hey, GoDaddy, is CorpseCoffee.com available? And GoDaddy says, well, yes, Dave, it is. And for $12, you can have it. Like,
nice.
Sold American. I bought me a domain. It's like, okay, so now what? Well, it turns out my cousin is the roast master for an independent coffee company in Santa Fe. So I write to my cousin Tom. I say, Tom, could you come up with some custom blends of bean, and then I could market them through this Corpse Coffee thing? It's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So he and I came up with a light, medium, and dark roast blend. We've got the light roast is Graveyard Jezebel. The medium roast is Abracadaver. And the dark roast is Bone Rattler.
Okay.
So, and then I approached my other cousin who writes and illustrates children's books and has this deep, deep love of the old 1930s horror movies. And I said, Cousin Scott, if I were to come up with a web comic, would you be willing to illustrate it for me? And then I could do the colors and the lettering. He said, yeah, that sounds like fun. So we're up to like issue 8 of our web comic.
Oh, that's so awesome.
And then I gamed with a friend who I actually not even a friend, I just an acquaintance. And everybody was raving about her teas. And I went to her website, tabletopteas.com, and she's deeply nerdy and has like teas for all of the Infinity Stones. And she's got like Iron Man tea and Doctor Strange tea. And it's amazing. So I asked her, would you be willing to play in this playground? I said, yeah, sounds great. So we came up with the Little Death, the Shroud, and Banshee Gold for the tea blends. So that is, and that was in January. That was like 3 months of development, and then boom, this thing is out in the world. It's just amazing.
Oh, that's so cool.
So yes. And then the game Manifest. This is a game that I've been building for quite some time now, several years, a decade at least. And it's basically, it's a combination of Magic the Gathering meets chess. You got positional strategies and pieces moving in a particular way with, harvesting and magic and different cultures and races and so on. And I was doing some play testing for it, but the cost to produce a game is prohibitive. But then Steam, the online game platform, there's this Tabletopia thing where you can literally create all of the elements of your game. And basically Tabletopia is just a physics generator. So the players can like turn over cards or move pieces and so on. It doesn't do anything for you. It just simulates the experience. So I can put the game up there and have people try it out up there.
Cool.
So, yeah. Got so much stuff going on. Oh my God.
Yeah. I know you do, Dave. It's crazy.
So yes, now I'm the guest. The one thing I haven't done in a long damn time is interview somebody. So I'm really keen to get back into those boots, baby.
Well, as our audience can tell, we all know each other fairly well.
Yes.
Strangers.
Yes, exactly.
No. So this is probably going to be more of a conversation than an interview, honestly.
Well, can I start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Cat, in preparation for this delightful reunion, I actually went back and I listened to our first episode when we had you on back in 2014.
I was wondering when that was.
Yep, it was June 2014. You were vice president and you were just stepping into long form fiction with the Beasts of Tibet.
Yeah.
And in the intervening years, holy crap, we've got Beasts, we've got Hearts, we've got Exiles, which just now came out, right?
Mm-hmm. Just last month.
Yes. And then you're working on Gods, which will complete the quartet.
Yes.
Plus You Sexy Thing coming out from Tor, which is sci-fi magic.
It is space opera. I just call it what they tell me. I at first called it fantasy, and I was informed that I was wrong, and it's not military fantasy. It's space opera.
Space opera. Let's call it space fantasy because you've got starships and portals and space stations and magic and prophecy and all of that. So all of this stuff is going on. So clearly you're getting the hang of this long form fiction thing. And I was just curious, when I first interviewed you, you were known as the person who had done 200 plus short stories. And this was a fairly new experience for you. So I'm curious, what in the intervening years, what have you learned about your craft in the building of long form fiction in comparison with short form?
I've learned that one of the big differences is when you approach a story, you can hold all of it in your head, while when you're working with a novel, you can't in the same way. And so you're always in this process where you're coming back to the manuscript and you're discovering something and you're like, oh, and it's this sort of perpetual like, oh shit, yes, that's part of it too. And I think the thing that's interesting to me is You Sexy Thing is a very different book than the Tabat books. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because You Sexy Thing had a very different writing process than the Tabat books. The Tabat books were much more sort of slow boil, let me pop around and write this scene, and now I'm going to write another scene, and just a very slower, organic process.
Well, and you had the Tabat books in your head for like a decade.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. And I've written a ton of stories in that world as well. But with You Sexy Thing, I actually sat down and wrote it over the course of, I want to say it was either 4 weeks or 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
And what happened was I had been at Pacific Northwest Writers Association, and I'd met Chris Fox, who wrote this book called How to Write 5,000 Words in an Hour. Which is, of course, how can you not be allured by that title? And I found out I actually am not capable of writing 5,000 words in an hour. It's just not my nature. But I am capable of this kind of modified process where I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning. I'd eat breakfast. I'd go to the gym and work out while thinking about what I was going to write. And then I would come home and write throughout the course of the morning. And the key was I could not touch the internet until I had hit 5,000 words. And so and I mean, like, not on the phone, not text, not anything. It's just like no email. And that was hard.
Did you air gap your computer so that you weren't tempted?
It was very tempting too. And my spouse is always very pleased to helpfully announce that he will disable the router anytime I like. And I'm like, no. So, yeah. But it was written very fast, and it was written much more sort of consecutively. And I'm trying to do the same with the one that I'm finishing up right now. It was also written pretty fast, but I need to go back and finish the last chunk of it.
I was going to say, with that kind of speed, do you? I'm not going to ask you to assign a judgment value to the story, but does it feel different in your heart?
I think it does. I think it is much faster moving. It is much more banter driven. There's a lot, I think, less description. I mean, there's still description. It's still, I think, fairly effective description. But Tabat has kind of long, beautiful passages about, the swans in the park.
It's much more lyrical.
Yeah. It's much slower, and that's fair. I mean, some people, I think, fantasy readers come to it for that kind of world.
Sure.
And with You Sexy Thing, I sat down and wrote the kind of book that I like to read, and so it's found family, it's banter. And there is, or at least my intent is, to have, over the course of the series, a long, smoldering romance that by the end of the series will have every reader just so keen to find out what's going to actually happen.
Just kiss! Oh my God! Would you just kiss?
Oh God!
Well, and I would imagine that with a shorter production, with a shorter creative spurt like You Sexy Thing, you were dealing almost instinctively with your storytelling instincts, whereas with Tabat, you can have a lot more orchestrated control over the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, and the other sort of impetus behind You Sexy Thing was Ann Leckie she periodically teaches a class for my school on space opera. And in the course of one of those classes, she said sort of wistfully, gee, I really wish someone would write a space opera in omniscient point of view. And this actually is my answer to that. Now, I don't know if the version that you saw, it's dedicated to.
Yep, I saw that.
Yeah.
For that reason. Plus, she's pretty cool.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
I'm curious, do you feel like, having written You Sexy Thing now, do you feel like that's going to affect how you write the end of Tibet?
Somewhat, but partially because that fourth book has to tie up storylines from the 3 books before it, which is a pretty monumental task. So I've got to go into it in a much more sort of planned way, no matter what.
It's a lot of narrative baggage to be hauling into a book.
I mean, and I feel like now's my chance to go back and be like, this scene that felt like a throwaway in book 1, now I need to go back and add the scene, so like the readers be like, oh, holy shit, she meant to do that.
Chekhov's gun, baby. Go back to book 1. Yes,
that's it. Yeah, so go back and find all the Chekhov's guns, and then I'll look brilliant.
Yes, exactly. And that's the beauty of post-production and editing. You can do that.
It really is.
Well, and I've always been an advocate of collateral material for a story world, and you've done a wonderful job of that with Tibet, with all of the market guides and the views and perspectives and all of that. Do you have a story Bible, a world building document for Tibet?
I really should.
You really should.
Uh-oh.
May I recommend an app that might be helpful in documenting the story world?
That's what I was thinking about. No, and I tell you why I haven't done it is because your awesome app did not come along until well into the Tibet stories, and every time I thought about putting that amount of work into it, I thought, oh,
that's a lot of work.
I got other stuff I need to do. But so my hope is someday to be so big.
Hire somebody.
Prize-wise, but success-wise, that someone will be like, "Oh, I'll come along and do that." I love Tibet so much.
We're actually getting ready to include importing, so you can import spreadsheets of character into the app to minimize some of that labor.
Oh, I do have some of that.
That does not surprise me. Awesome, very cool. What else? I mean, I can only imagine that. For so long, because you kind of have occupied a space in certainly in my fandom anyway, as I'm not going to say maternal, but I will say a shepherd or a teacher, someone who is always willing to hear a question and give an answer and offer guidance and insight. And for the first time, you kind of broached a new frontier, going from short to long form fiction. Do you feel like you've achieved a level of mastery in your craft, having got 4, 5 under your belt now?
Well, so first off, I want to say thank you for not saying maternal. It always kind of bugs me.
It kind of creeps you out. I know. I feel the same way.
Like maybe a beloved aunt/uncle of some kind.
Shepherd and mentor we'll go with.
That's it, shepherd. And I teach a lot of people, and it's been a huge pleasure seeing some of the folks come up. We mentioned Jamie Lackey, I don't know if we were recording at that point, but like Jamie came through one of my classes. I feel like I've gotten to a level where I'm past journeyman. I'm actually kind of at the level where I'm doing the pro thing. I don't want to say I'm mastered anything, because one of the things about teaching and getting all these other people to teach for me is you're always learning how much you have to learn. And so I think I'm on my way. I think maybe in about 10 years, I may have hit masterful level, but I'm working pretty hard on it. I mean, I think for me, that's one of the big advantages of bringing other people in to teach is I am, in effect, taking at least 2 or 3 workshops every weekend.
Right.
Listening to them. Sometimes repeats, but not always. Go ahead.
So what are the challenges of changing it up between the short fiction and the long fiction then?
Ooh. Yeah. Do you have to rewire your brain to tell stories in long form?
Well, I think part of it is about managing energy level.
Okay.
Because with a short story, you can reasonably expect to sit down and finish it within 1, maybe 2 sessions. Whereas a novel, you're much more like, okay, I'm going to spend at least a month, probably longer, just on creating the first draft. And then I'm going to want to, go back and spend at least a month, maybe longer, editing it. And a month is insanely short, by the way, in case anybody thinks I'm advocating for it. So you're committing to it. I mean, there's actually, every time I finish a novel, there's a period afterwards where I feel it's kind of like a breakup, right? Like something that occupied a whole bunch of your attention is suddenly gone and you can't, do anything with it because it's off to the agent or whatever.
Right.
And you're just like, what do I do now? I've got this big void that used to be occupied.
Lots of sad songs and ice cream.
Always ice cream. Well, it is sad, it is, and I think it would be easy to be depressed, or at least a little bit, after that. So I always try to make sure I've got multiple projects going on, and I've always got stories that I want to be working on.
I was going to say your to be written stack must be enormous.
Oh God. Well, I'm doing the Clarion West Write-a-thon this summer, and I specifically said what I'm going to do is each month I'm going to finish one of my unfinished stories. So I'm taking this week. I'm finishing up. I've done this thing that I feel shameful about, but I wrote a story about my D&D character.
Yes. See, you're one of us. Cat.
I love her so much. She is the best character ever. But I'm not going to do that thing where somebody just talks about their character. But anyway, so the Holland story gets finished the first week, and then next week I have a near future science fiction story that I've been thinking about for about a year and a half that I really should just clear away and finish.
Lovely. All right. Okay. Boy, I don't know if we want to get into this, but you invoked gaming, Cat. And gaming is storytelling, and clearly you do it. And you have classes about writing for games.
I do.
I have been blown away of late between Critical Role and Dimension 20 and the stories that are being told in that framework.
Yes.
It boggles my mind how D&D role-playing games have been around for decades, and they've always been a narrative form. But now with YouTube and TikTok and Twitch, it's suddenly it feels different. It feels like something has been elevated to a level that is intimidating. Do you feel that as well?
Well, I think there is much more emphasis on storytelling, and you get some fabulous storytelling games like the Powered by the Apocalypse stuff.
Yeah. And all the spin-offs that it's generated. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My brother actually did one called Hearts of Wulin that I played in his campaign. It was just amazing. It's certainly, I'm trying to, I think the old D&D games where it would just be a bunch of people sitting around a table rolling dice might not be as televisable as some of the stuff nowadays.
Right.
Because you can share the map and you can do sound effects and like Roll20, right? You can do like fireballs and all sorts of
You're right. Have a soundtrack playing under the background with Sirenscape, all of that. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I've been part of a game that's been going on Twitch for 2.5 years now, I think.
Wow.
Which is, and it's Esper Genesis, which is, it's basically D&D 5e in space. And I love that game. I love the people that I play with. We just have such a good time. And part of it is that we've got just an amazing game master, and he puts some time into sound effects and all of that. And it's a wonderful experience every time I play.
Production values become a factor now, you know, your graphics and so on. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
It's intriguing to me to watch the elevation of a pastime that we've all engaged in, some of us for longer years than others, to see it elevated to this level of, I mean, oh my God, sponsorships? Really?
Yeah.
You know, it's big when money wants to get involved with it.
Oh yeah.
Jeez Louise.
Gen Con and Origins.
Right?
I mean,
yes.
Gen Con.
Yeah.
Oh my.
It's so crazy.
Oh God. 70,000 game nerds descending on one city is a rush.
One city.
It really is a different culture now. I mean, I have an older daughter who's 23, and her and her boyfriend are like, oh yeah, like everybody plays D&D. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's just like an accepted thing. Whereas back in the day, it was like,
you were a pariah.
You kind of like didn't talk about that really. You know what I mean?
Well, I had a friend that had to sneak out to play it because her family was very devout, and it was around the same time that there was all the sort of D&D is satanic.
Satanic Panic.
Satanic Panic. Yes.
I have a funny story about that. I mean, back in the must have been early 90s, I had a friend whose family was very religious, and but he loved playing D&D. And so one day he comes to school with his books and he's like, you got to hide these for me. You got to take them. My parents found them and they're flipping out and they're going to like burn all my stuff. So I was like, yeah, man, I'll take it. Because my parents didn't give a crap,
And it's not a bag of marijuana or a bag of pills. It's the player's handbook, man.
Right. It's not like, it's not like a bag of heroin or something, right? And so I take him home and then one day, we get this knock on the door, and my mom, who's like the most laid back person in the universe, answers the door to the left. We heard that you have these books. And she's like, what are you talking about?
It's the role-playing police, baby.
and she didn't know that I have them, but she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you please leave? And they left. And, I just, my friend kept them at my house from that point on. And I would like give them back to him at school, and he would take them home, sneak them home every now and then. And we'd like trade them at school. It was crazy.
Kudos to your mom for being so cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
For sure.
That's awesome. So let's bring this back to a story perspective, because I've recently run into some challenges with my old school way of looking at storytelling compared to these young kids and their gaming. What are the distinctions? And I don't want to do any spoilers for you how to write for games class, but maybe some high level considerations for the differences between writing a story for print or narration and writing a story for a game.
Oh, sure. I can tell you one insight that Kate Hartfield gave me where I was sort of like, oh, and then of course, it's common sense, which is that when you're writing the sort of stuff that's interactive, like she does choice of game stuff, which is a lot like the old choose your own adventure sort of on steroids.
Right.
But I always thought it would be sort of like a tree where the choices would sort of skew outward and outward and outward, a little bit like the Wheel of Time series, that sort of, like, blah! And she said, no, it's more like a diamond, and kind of like around the halfway to 2/3 mark, you start pulling stuff in and you start closing down avenues. And so then you end up at an end where that actually there's, you can do like one of several ends, certainly, but you don't have 500 gazillion of them. And that made so much sense to me. And I would like to try writing a game at some point for them. I think that would be a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. Cause I know that, in my own development of stories in games, stories, that you want to create those seeds, those hooks, those this is happening over here, this is happening over here. But in order to get that satisfaction of, yes, we have completed this, you're right. All of that has to be in service to the climax, to the conclusion that you're trying to urge the story towards. Yeah. And I've always felt, and this might be a personal thing, but I've always felt that those hooks, those branches need to be tied to the characters.
Oh, I think so. I think it's much more interesting when you get the sort of game master who thinks about that and who actually does come up with material. And I love the fact that I love game masters where they'll sort of take something that you've done and run with it. I had a little background document I'd done for my character that included another character that she had as a kind of rivalry with. And Greg read it, and sure enough, this character popped up in the campaign, and it surprised me because I was just like, "Oh shit! It's just
here come the consequences. Here come the consequences." Yes,
I love that.
Well, and I absolutely feel that because when a game storyteller, let's keep that storytelling, does that. It affirms the investment that you as the player have made in that story by coming up with that backstory.
Oh, absolutely. And it does the thing that I think games do that is so different than fiction, which is that they are even more a cooperative form, right? It is
yes,
a story that all of you are telling. And I think the game master can be totally controlling, or they can really welcome the player input. And I really think the second type of game ends up being much more interesting and interesting for the game master as well.
Yes.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. Alan, I know you came into this with questions, dude. I've been monopolizing the microphone.
No worries. Okay. Well, you just tossed it over to me. Now I got to figure out where I'm going to start.
Oh, crap. Where are my notes? Where are my notes?
I was going to go back to You Sexy Thing a little bit, if that's okay with everybody.
Ooh, yes.
So I've heard you mention that you believe your new novel is hope punk, and that's something that we talk about on here. Do you feel that you've achieved that with your new novel? And, what about your new novel do you feel is hope punk?
I think that among the things that make it hope punk, one is that it is a novel of found family, people that are thrown together by circumstance and lean into that. It is a resistance to the forces of despair. And it's a very cheerful novel, even though a lot of bad shit happens here and there. It is, I think, a novel about resiliency. And at least the one that I'm working on right now, some of the events of the first book, I'm working on people's reactions to that. You both read the book, so you know what I'm talking about, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And I got to say, kudos for starting them in a restaurant. Oh, my God. I love it. And it's like, Cassandra Craw's doing a class at Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers on including food in, and I was going to say, I'll bet Cat sat in on that. And I'll bet, we're seeing the fruits of that experience here.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, Dave, because I had that exact same thought at some point.
Oh, it's such a wonderful, talk about cutting through all of the barriers, all of the mental and social barriers. Everybody understands the kitchen, the food, and the delight and the joy thereof. Yeah. What a universal icon to gather your readers around. Just kudos.
And I gotta say, I really love the communal aspect of the characters too, because you do have a lead character in there that kind of everything hangs on to some degree, but each character moves the plot forward in some way. Mm-hmm. It isn't just all on that one character's shoulders. There is no chosen one, so to speak.
So to speak.
Let me ask you something, Alan. This is Cat. Just hush. This is for you. When you read the book, did you see it in your brain as live action or animation?
Interesting. I saw it in my brain as animation.
Yes, so did I. I absolutely did. I would be curious, Kat, if you could ask that question once or twice of people. I'm curious why? I mean, because you and I, Alan, we had that same experience, and it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? There was never a question. It wasn't a choice that I made. It was just, I see this as anime or something like anime.
I saw it very Simpson-ish. What's the
Matt Groening?
Yeah, Matt Groening kind of style. Honestly, I really did.
I saw Speed Racer. It was the old Speed Racer animation.
That would be, gosh. Well, if any animators are listening and want to buy this for their network,
right?
Come on, Netflix.
Because, yeah, really, no kidding. Well, and that's a thing too. Now that's another. Okay, I don't know. Sorry, Alan. Please continue.
No, go Dave.
I'll just jot. All right. Okay. I don't know if this, and Kat, you have a broader perspective on this. So you can help clarify this for me. It feels like I'm seeing a lot more writers having their works acquired and developed by media companies than used to be. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
That is my impression as well. And how that is happening, I do not know, because I would certainly love to ride that wave.
Right?
But yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that's happened recently is like Seanan McGuire's Wayward Children stuff got optioned, and I am so excited about that. Well, there's been a bunch of stuff that's gotten optioned, and we're watching Smoke and Bone right now.
Yes,
that's good stuff,
and enjoy it immensely.
Yeah.
How do you all feel about Love, Death, and Robots? Because I have opinions.
I like some of them very much. It really kind of varies a lot. I liked the other day for the short story group that I run, we read Ballard's The Drowned Giant, and it was fun to put it with the robots episode. But you have opinions, so I want to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I want to hear your opinion.
There's opinion with a capital O.
It is an opinion with capital O. But I do want to say very quickly, the Rich Larson episode, I had read that previous to watching it, and they started it, and I was like, this is that Rich Larson story, isn't it? And it was pretty awesome. I think they did a good job with that one. And Rich Larson's just awesome anyway. But I just can't believe I went through and looked at all the authors, and there's like no women authors. None.
No.
Second season, there are 0.
Well, feel free to write to Netflix and mention that you want to see more authors of any kind. Because,
or better, write them on Twitter.
Yeah, they do pay attention to that stuff. Agree.
Yes.
I just couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? And they had some of these older authors like J.G. Ballard, who's a relatively classic author, but. Then they have other people like Rich Larson. So why not just include some women instead of J.G. Ballard? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is this podcast PG-13
or
are we allowed to drop
the F-bomb?
Okay, what the fuck, Netflix? Jesus Christ, read the fucking room, guys.
Well, that's the thing that really blew my mind is like, come on, it had to have been a choice. Like I feel like it was some guy just said, okay, we're just doing dudes. That's it.
Oh, I don't even know if it was a choice. I think that stuff just it gets expressed in what people present and, the selection that probably got given them. And I mean, a lot of it I don't think is malicious. I think, and that's the sort of bad thing about it.
That's the insidious thing about it.
People being evil, that would be one thing, but it's people just being ignorant.
People making choices and not making that extra effort to look at the broader landscape and impact of those choices.
And I don't even think they need to. I mean, just look at the awards. Just look at the awards. Who has won the awards in the last few years? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of them are women. I mean, that's it. I mean, they obviously looking. They found Rich Larson.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That guy has written one novel, I think, and all short stories other than that.
But bajillion short stories.
A bajillion. Yeah, he's like the new Cat Rambo.
No, he was on the scene before I was. I'm pretty sure. I think. I don't know. It all fades together. It's all just a blur. Yeah,
I know. Right after a certain amount of time, it all just kind of blurs. Yes. I enjoyed the crap out of it. One of the things that struck me was there were entirely too many times watching those animations when I questioned whether it was an animation or real life.
Oh, yeah.
And inevitably something would happen. It's like, oh no, that's an animation.
Yeah.
But man, some of those,
some of them.
It's like we are rapidly approaching an age, and I mean like in 5 or 10 years, when reality will be faithfully and authentically simulated in a studio.
So
I agree.
So for you, it was that kind of uncanny valley stuff where it's kind of between the two. Interesting. Yeah, I could see it.
Very much so.
How can I say the ones that were artfully done, I think, managed to overcome that because you were kind of looking at that artful spectacle, if you will,
right?
You know, of like,
and I enjoyed those immensely.
Yes.
The guy on the train and the ice guys, those were so blatantly animated, and they used the animation to augment and accentuate the story with these broad strokes. The realistic stuff basically just used camera angles and lighting, which is what every producer.
Well, now that you mention it, the one that I really remember is that one where he goes up and it's the night sky and it's full of the ghosts of the old fossil creatures, and it's beautiful.
Yes, that was
gorgeous. That was gorgeous.
They are telling intriguing stories in there, and they are showcasing some astonishing animation. So I absolutely support it. But yeah, we need to keep a diverse voice in our storytelling. Yo.
Absolutely. I don't want to hate on it too much because I do think it is great, and I do think it is great that they are looking at people who are a little more obscure, like Rich Larson. I don't think outside of the science fiction community, people would probably know who he is, but I think that is great, and I totally agree. The animation is unbelievable on most of them. Yeah. But yeah, just diversity, guys. That's all I'm asking.
That's all I'm asking. That's all anybody's asking. Yeah. All right. Kat, you've written on this topic several times and from several perspectives regarding an online presence as a storyteller. And you've written about creating good Patreons. You've written about creating a good online presence. You also wrote an awesome article on the whole Jason Sanford Bain Books thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it all comes together. It all kind of blends together. And I guess I would like to hear your perspective, especially seeing as how, like myself, you remember when it wasn't like this, and coming into this as a new author in this world where can you be a successful author without engaging in the online arena? And I pick that word very specifically.
Yeah, I could totally see where using arena because, so the answer is going to be different for different people. And some people swim in the internet blithely and have a lovely time, and you can say no matter what is said to them, they're perfectly fine. And then there are people who can get really hurt by what happens on the internet. And, and sometimes the internet spills over onto real life.
All too often.
I had trolls got my dad's memorial page taken down. What they did was they filled it with like literally hundreds of crappy fake memorials. So, like, what do you do? I was thinking about this the other day. Like, what do you do? I mean, for me, I'm kind of like, well, Dad would have just been like, yeah, what the shit was that? You know, and I'm kind of like, yeah, well, but I mean, it affects other people, right? Like, it affects all the other members of the family. And I think that's total bullshit. So, you know, you do remember that this is a place where no matter how well armored you are, there's people getting hurt by some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And as a writer, I mean, that has habitually been the introvert's playground.
Well, and
you know?
I think a writer should actually think of it as a persona, right? Here is my persona that I run on Twitter. And actually, this is not how I do it on Twitter at all. So this is really bad advice. But I think this would be a good, if one followed it, would be to think of it, as a persona. And be like, this is my character, right? This is my paladin runs my Twitter stream or whatever.
There you go. Yeah.
I would tell you one thing. I have a little bit of experience with this, having been in bands for many years. I was in a band called Drunk by Six. Like, you can probably see where this is going already. And we did try to play out the personas. Unfortunately, those personas became a little too serious. So I would caution people just to be careful with that.
Well, there's Ruth Reichel, the food critic, talks about how when she was doing food reviews, she started doing it. And she started putting personas on before she went to visit a restaurant because she didn't want them to guess that she was a New York Times food critic. And she had several, and she stopped doing it because she found herself getting too carried away by the personas.
Too immersed in the character.
Stop. So, yeah.
See, I've always said a theater background serves you well in the writing community. And here is an unexpected benefit of that experience, being able to shed a persona.
But I mean,
oh my God.
New writers do have to think about that before they get online. I really think before they begin creating their sort of authorly presence. And they need to think about what do they feel comfortable saying online. They need to think about what information they're comfortable giving. And one of the things that they need to remember is that not only are their friends reading them on Facebook, but there's a whole slew of criminals and weirdos and bad faith actors.
Corporate.
Yeah. Oh, God. Corporations. Yeah. And
it boggles my mind. And again, this is my old man coming out, that, a new author coming into it saying, okay, I've got my book. I want to market it and promote it. And there's the internet, shiny and bright and full of people that want to hear about your story. Yes, I will go to the internet and market my book. And the fact that we have to issue cautions about how you do that is, I guess I am. My old man is coming through really hard at this point.
I mean, you and I come from the same generation that sort of like saw the internet pop up, and we're just like, holy shit, this is amazing. And we saw kind of how amazing the social potential for it was. And to see that flushed away by corporate interests and stupid political bullshit has just been a huge disappointment.
Yeah. But you seem to navigate it pretty well, Kat, may I say.
Well, I used to run an online game, which was a MUD, and in it had what we call permadeath, which meant that sometimes if a character died, that character was dead. And I was one of the people that handled the emails from people whose character had died.
You were the messenger of death? Oh my God.
And so, I got used to people being pissy at me on the internet pretty early on. And I do. One of the reasons I'm fairly outspoken on the internet is I do think of myself as, to a certain extent, drawing a certain amount of deliberate fire just so they don't go after people who have lesser egos. Not egos. I mean, it's like, people who'd be more upset about it. To me, like, I've heard
that don't have the thick skin that you've developed over years of dealing with this crap. I mean, exactly. So you're basically a social media for the party. That's what you're saying here.
Yeah.
Protecting the magic users and the
Well,
clerics.
that is one of my favorite roles. I like paladins. I like cat tanks.
Yeah. Well, after being president of Sifwa for so long, I mean, you're kind of like a level 20 internet tank at this point. So.
I have stories. None
of which you can tell on here.
I can tell on recorded media. No.
I saw books flaring off the arm of Orion. Yeah, I remember.
I keep thinking that I'm going to write a comic novel based on my time at Sifwa. And often I say it just to see who sort of blenches at the thought.
Oh God, yes, under a pseudonym, and ghost, all of that. But yeah.
I have thoughts with a capital T.
It's going to be Kate Schwarzenegger.
Well, that's it.
There
we go.
That's a good one. I hadn't even thought of that. I like that.
Hey, are you thinking of developing a role-playing game around Tibet?
I would like to. I do actually. I've been kind of playing around with a little card game based on some of the merchant stuff with the merchant.
Fun.
But I'm not good at that sort of thing as far as like game mechanics. So I've actually been kind of trying to read up a little bit on that. But yeah, and I would love to do a RPG supplement where people could just run around the streets of Tibet. But that requires drawing maps, which is also not my forte.
There are many resources online. Incarnate, in particular, is amazing.
Incarnate with an I.
Incarnate with an I and a K. So INKARNATE. Incarnate.com. Beautiful, beautiful overland maps and city maps.
Definitely put that out. Yeah, I love gaming, and during the pandemic, I actually reached out to somebody that used to run a face-to-face game, and I was like, Yang, would you please run D&D for us? And we've been running pretty much every Monday night for about a year and a half.
Nice.
And that's fun.
Wow, that's impressive. How the game that goes that long? That's amazing. Yeah. I don't have a lot of experiences along those lines.
It's nice. I mean, you really, particularly when you're playing with friends, it's such a nice bonding activity, and it's just pleasant.
Yeah.
And the celebration of character arcs and triumphs and defeats and, that whole microcosm of story within these weekly or bi-weekly get-togethers.
The little in-jokes.
Very appealing.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
All right, guys, we have to start wrapping up here.
No!
Yes, unfortunately.
Damn it. See, you get to be the bad guy. See, on the round table, it was always me. Now you get it.
It's true. I do always have to be the bad guy. It's true, but that's okay. I'm okay being the bad guy sometimes.
Fair.
I am a father. I am a bad guy a lot of the time, actually. So a few questions. I guess I'm just going to ask them to both of you because we've never done a guest interview before, and so this is a little bit different. So, Dave, you may or may not know this, but we ask one specific question at the end of every podcast, and that is, what is bringing you hope right now? And I don't think Cat has ever answered that question either. So we'll start with Cat, and then we'll go to Dave.
The thing that is giving me hope right now is the fact that it's the season when all of the baby birds are just starting to come out of the nest. And so they're all over our porch, and we have 2 little baby woodpeckers that have apparently decided that the porch is safe space. And I just love going in and out and seeing them watching me with their sort of big-eyed, I don't really want to leave the suet feeder, but oh my God, what are you? Sort of. And so that's my most recent hopeful thing.
That's beautiful.
Great. Dave?
Well, honestly,
Woodpecker,
the
courage. The woodpecker.
I know, right? How you follow that? Come on. So recently, and I don't recommend this for anybody, but I recently got into TikTok. Don't do it under any circumstances. And I haven't created any content. I'm just looking and observing. And what I'm seeing there and through other social media platforms, as much as I rail against that arena and what it represents, there is a lot of courage out there. There's a lot of intelligence. There are a lot of people that are confronting hate with knowledge and insight and truth. And if we're going to get through this without some catastrophic transformation, it's going to be through people like that continue to confront mindless rage and bigotry with compassion and intellect and truth. So it's a slender hope, but it's a hope that I'm clinging to.
No, yeah, much love to those people. I tell you, they are the true warriors, because I can never get myself mentally in a space where I'm calm enough to explain this sort of thing to someone and also remember the stuff at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, right. I can't argue for crap. I would love to be a tank and be out front and be one of those people, but I don't have it. I took frickin' forensics in high school and college thinking I could become a good debater. It's like, nope, that is not my jam. So there we go.
No, totally. All right. So, and last question, where can we find you both on the web? Kat, I don't think we've ever talked about your website on here, so why don't you give your info first, and then Dave?
Well, you can always go to catrambo.com. That's the main website, and that's got everything on there. And then you can find me on Twitter. And actually, let me plug my YouTube channel, because I'm trying to
Yes.
Hey, I have a YouTube channel. You can find links to it on my website. catrambo.com. Okay, I'm done.
And droplets. I can give thumbs up for that. Droplets and gems of insights in small digestible bits, but wisdom that you can consume and use instantly. It's definitely worth your following.
I really enjoy it.
I'll bet. See, I'm waiting for you to. I keep thinking, God, these would be great on TikTok.
Micro learnings, Dave. I'll bring you back to the corporate world of micro learnings.
Oh, see, all these terms. That's the other thing about this new millennia. This new millennia crap. Everybody's got a term for everything. It's new words. All the damn words. All right. So, any place else we can find you, Kat? I mean, we got kittywampus.net, which is tied to catrambo.com, as I recall.
It is. And the catrambo.com and kittywampus.net are verily the same.
Verily. Yay.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Patreon. If people want to join my Discord server, supporting me on Patreon is the best way to join that. Mm-hmm. And that is where I have daily co-working sessions and various events.
But one of the perks of joining Kat's Patreon is you get discounts on classes.
You do. And free classes.
And if you've been to the class list, it's 3 feet freaking long. You just keep scrolling. And sneaky little minx that you are, you made it alphabetical, not categorical. Yeah. So if you're looking for something, you got to look at all of it.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't even thought of there is a category list in that it's sorted by the certificate that you can get, because you can get like a world builder certificate. I need to look at that. It's on that list of things I really should be doing.
We all have one of those. Yes. For me, you can find my vocal profile if you've been listening and going, my God, that man's voice. I want more of it. I want to use it in my project and pay him buckets of money to do it. If you make your way to butterymanvoice.com, I shit you negative. You can go there and there's contact information. My demo reels are up there. Samples are up there. Butterymanvoice.com. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. And definitely check out.
Be on TikTok. Yeah? Remember to use your TikTok handle.
I don't know. If I do, it's going to be Brew Corpse. So corpsecoffee.com for zombie themed coffee and tea and web comics and merch, of course. And then archivos.digital, archivos.digital. Get a free account up there so you can start documenting and organizing and structuring your story. Start seeing your story the way you think about your story with the Archivos development platform. I think that's it for now.
Are you sure you don't have another like dozen projects?
Right? I mean, I look when I launch Chrome in the morning, I have it set to open up all of my 7 freaking email accounts.
Oh god.
Oh Jesus.
I've got 3 and that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I know it. Give me time. I'll get it up to an even dozen.
All right. So let's end our interview there. Before we go, though, don't forget, Cat has 2 new books out right now, Exiles and Tibet. And U60 Thing will be out the month after this podcast comes out.
Hooray!
So everyone go and check those out.
Hot.
Thanks a lot, Cat.
Thank you. This has been delightful.
Yes, it has. Lovely to at least be with you virtually, Cat.
So cool.
I'm not done with you yet, though, Dave. You have to stay.
Oh, okay, fine.
Hey all, you know that here at If This Goes On, we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. Life is not a zero-sum game.
Aurelio Leo Publishing believes the same thing. If you haven't heard of them, they're a publisher that focuses on disabled, queer, trans, black, indigenous, and other storytellers of color.
They intend to pursue their mission further with their new podcast, Aurelia.
Twice a month, Aurelia will feature reviews, interviews, and short fiction produced by or about disabled, queer, trans, black, indigenous, and other storytellers of color, hosted by our friend Zelda Knight.
They are kicking off with interviews of N.J. Ember in a series of short stories by Edmund Schusel and Miko Rahala, published in the Infinite Metropolis collection.
If you want to hear more about disabled, queer, trans, black, indigenous, and other storytellers of color, check them out at aureliapodcast.com. That's AURELIA podcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Okay, and that was our interview with Cat Rambo. Before we continue on, I want to remind you all that we do have a Patreon. And as Dave had mentioned there at the end about discounts with Cat's Patreon, you can also get discounts for Cat Rambo School for Wayward Writers at our Patreon.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes, absolutely. And everyone out there should go and do that immediately.
Hell yeah. Get on that. Holy crap.
Get on that. Also, we've got other tiers. We've got extra material that we put out there. I do a 5-minute book review every now and then out there. We have podcasts that have never been released anywhere else out there. We also have a new coffee account that I just started. So that's KOFI Coffee. If you, instead of giving us money monthly, just want to give us a one-off donation, you could go there instead. That is coffee/if this goes on, don't panic. And our Patreon is patreon.com/if this goes on. Just if this goes on. No, don't panic in there.
It's implied.
It's implied. Yes, that's right. That's right. If you like what we're doing, please give us money. At minimum, share us with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. And you can find us on any place that does podcasting. So please go and check us out. Now that we've had that conversation with Cat, Dave, how are you feeling about it? What stuck out to you? What did you like about that?
Oh God, what struck out to me is how much I have missed Cat Rambo. Holy crap! Oh God, and thank you. First of all, before I get into that, thank you for inviting me as a guest interviewer for this. That meant a lot. And then that hour with Cat was huge, and you, the two of us. Have stayed that connection from Nebula's
20 years ago, I think. It's been a while.
So it's good to reconnect all the way around. But as far as that conversation goes, honestly, the thing that stood out for me, and this is going to be small, petty, and selfish, but the fact that Kat did a story about her D&D character. Oh my God, that was awesome.
Because that's exactly what you're not supposed to do, right?
Right? Exactly. But if anybody could pull that shit off, it's Cat Rambo.
Yeah.
You know? But it really it unlocked a lot of awarenesses in my mind and challenges that I've been dealing with as far as the narratives within that gaming world that have become more and more mainstream and more authentic. And I mean, we've got lit RPG as a genre now.
Yes.
And so hearing that, first of all, it just made her even more human than she already was. The fact that she does that, bless you, Cat. But also just her insights into that and the fact that, you know, she is drawing on so many individuals in her experience as an editor, as president, as a teacher, and as a student, and incorporating them into her work so elegantly and so gracefully. I mean, like I said, I've read the opening few chapters of You Sexy Thing, and I'm going, crap. There's 3 Rambo Academy classes represented right there in those chapters, which was really kind of cool. So yeah, that's what stood out for me.
Yeah, she is one of a kind in that she does the teaching. She is still a student. She's a master of short fiction, undoubtedly a master of short fiction. And
she would argue that, but okay.
She might, but the rest of us wouldn't, you know.
True facts. And she's not your mother. She's a mentor or a shepherd, but
yeah. And she has four novels published, and the 5th and 6th probably coming out in the next year or two.
I'm so chuffed to see what comes down the pipe next for her.
And I can't wait to hear to learn more about You Sexy Thing.
Yes.
She did a short story for a publication that is in Pittsburgh, where I am based, called, what was it called? Oh, Air and Nothing Press. Okay. And I love supporting this press, and I do review their books on here occasionally, but their art, the cover art is just beautiful. And sometimes I will admit that I just buy the books for the covers, and who knows if I'll ever get around to reading them or not. But she did a story for them back in the Cities of Dust, Plains of Light anthology, and I read it. And you know, Diane Morrison, our other co-host, was in it, and 2 other Pittsburgh people, Jamie Lackey, who keeps coming up, was in it, and so I had to buy it, you know, and I had to read it immediately. And I read Cat's story, and I was like, I love this world, I love what's going on here, and I immediately messaged her on Twitter, like 10 minutes after I finished that. I messaged her. I'm like, I love this story. I love what you're doing with it. You could totally write a book in this whole world. And she's like, well.
Funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, that was You Sexy Thing.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, and just the fact that you can do that now, that you can go out on Twitter, hey, Cat Rambo, I just read your story. I love it. You could write a novel out of this. That is so cool. And I think people take that for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just amazing.
And if anybody wants to, I checked the website yesterday to see if there are any copies left. There are still copies of Cities of Dust, Plains of Light by Air and Nothing Press. If you're interested in seeing the prequel, I will warn everybody, they are a boutique publisher, just meaning that they only publish so many and then that's it. They're gone forever. So.
What's the URL for that, big guy?
I don't know the URL. I'm going to have to look that up.
Well, you'll have to put it in the links then on the episode when you put it up.
I will have to definitely do that. But it's called Air and Nothing Press.
Air and Nothing?
Yes, Air and Nothing Press. And I know if you Google it, it'll pop right up.
Sure. How zephyrish and ethereal.
Exactly.
Air and Nothing.
Exactly. You, Dave, you have to go and check out their artwork. It is phenomenal. They are doing one actually that is going to look like one of those old Ace doubles.
Oh, cool.
It is so cool. I sent it to the Cat.
Vintage. Excellent. Have you ever had artists, cover artists on the podcast?
Not yet. I would love to someday.
I was going to say, I mean, this, like you say, sometimes you buy a book for the cover, and a lot of times the cover is the first chapter of the story that gets people drawn in. It might be appropriate for the theme.
I would love to. Okay, here's a little bit behind the scenes for some people. Maybe I'll cut this out. I don't know. The problem is I am so damn busy that we don't do as many episodes as I would like to do. So, Dave, is there anything else you want to say about what you're doing before we end the podcast, or do you feel like you got all that in already?
Let me just say one last thing about Corpse Coffee, and this is going to sound grandstanding, but it's the simple truth. I created this thing thinking it was going to be a shtick. A gimmick. It's like, ooh, zombies and coffee. I'll buy it just because it's got a zombie on the label.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. As it turns out, my cousin is a freaking god when it comes to mixing bean. These coffees are astonishing. And the teas that Tanya Laird of Tabletop Teas has come up with us is mind-blowing, fabulous, subtle, nuanced, delicious. So when I advocate for Corpse Coffee, it's not just because, hey, it's a cool gimmick, zombies and coffee. It's because it's damn good. So that's all I wanted to let know. It's not just a gimmick. There's actual substance here. It's good damn coffee.
Awesome. And so with that, let's call it on this interview, but don't everyone go away. We do have one more segment left in this podcast. Unfortunately, Mr. Donald Ekpeki had to cancel his column this time around, so coming up are a few book reviews from yours truly. Hey everybody, this is my first time reporting new reviews since we've moved to the audio columns. So I've got 2 new books for you today. The first is The Blood-Dimmed Tide by Michael R. Johnston, published in 2020 by Flametree Press. This is the second novel in the Remembrance War trilogy. I reviewed the first one in episode 2 of this podcast, so feel free to go back and check that out if you'd like. In the first novel, Tajon Hunt, a heroic space jockey man character, finds the secret past of the human race. Now, the human race has started to move back to Earth after having lost it for 800 years. This time, however, the controlling alien race called the Zhen, spelled Z-H-E-N, have had enough of the human rebellions and intend to do something about it. Much like the first novel, this one is action-packed and high adventure. There are a lot of battle scenes and a lot of spying and not a lot of philosophizing. So if you like philosophizing type novels, this is not the place for you. A fast pace is kept throughout the novel. A few months can easily pass in a few paragraphs, but the author does manage to pack in a couple character arcs. There are a lot fewer space battles in this novel and a lot more land combat and spying, which, in my opinion, are equally fun. Oh, and also the main character is also queer, as, of course, he was in the first one. Previously, I'd compared this to Star Wars without the Jedi, and I'll still stick by that description for the most part, but Johnston does start to develop his world further and give it a little more original flavor. So if you're into queer space adventurers blowing up the space alien baddies, then this novel is definitely for you. The second novel I want to talk about is The Invisible by Seb Doubinsky, published 2020 by MeerKat Press. So this novel is the 8th book in his city-state cycle, and the second book within the Vita cycle, which is within the city-state cycle itself. So a cycle within a cycle. Coming into this, I did not know that this was the second book of the cycle within a larger cycle. So if you know me, then you'll know I'll be going back to read the others at some point. That being said, I didn't feel like I was missing anything by jumping into the middle of it. And Seb Doubinsky himself has said that they can really be read in any order, and that's okay. So let's talk about the story a bit. The city-state universe takes place in an alternate history where countries are broken up into city-states, as the name suggests. The world does use contemporary technology. So, for example, the characters use Skype in one scene, but the world events and politics seem to be very different. This book in particular does not do a super deep dive into the world outside the city in which the story takes place. So you don't really get a feel for what's going on outside of the city. Doubinsky says that he writes dystopias, but for this novel at least, the world is no more dystopian than what you see outside your window. So depending on how you feel about that, is how you're going to feel about whether this is a dystopia or not. It's pretty easy to follow what's happening from the get-go in this novel. So speaking of that, let's talk about what happens in the novel. The book is really a mystery story hung on a frame of science fiction and romance. The story really focuses on George Ratner, a police commissioner recently appointed to his position. Political pressure forces him to start cracking down on a drug called synth. Synth seems to create shared hallucinations, but it remains unclear throughout the novel. Then Ratner's friend and fellow policeman is murdered, and he has to figure out how the murder ties in. I really enjoyed this book. It was written in a very straightforward style, without much embellishment. However, there is some embellishment in the form of tarot card drawings in between each chapter, and also the fact that each chapter is named after that tarot card, and somehow Doubinsky manages to keep the theme of each tarot card throughout the chapter. We'll mention it is done with subtlety and style. The characters were also really well done. You really get a feel for the characters. One of the things I really appreciated was the relationship between Ratner and his wife. There was no macho nonsense about how marriage is terrible. Ratner is, in fact, a remarried widower, and not one tied down by bitterness or anger. It was truly a refreshing take after the nonsense Hollywood and many other novels shoved down your throat. So as you can see, there's a lot packed into this tiny book. If I had to sum it up, I'd say it was like Philip K. Dick wrote an Umberto Eco novel, or maybe the other way around. Anyway, pick this one up if you like questioning the nature of reality, conspiracies, and straightforward prose. So that's it. Thanks for listening. If you like what's going on with these, let us know. If you have any comments about any of the audio columns, please let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by Alan Bailey with production by Soundmaiden. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower. Additional music is by Christopher Snydrowski, and outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robison. A special thanks to our guest interviewer, Dave Robison. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.